not saying that I hate
exactly
PlayStation.
what I mean.
like
What I mean is that
PlayStation games.
making
My
games is
PS5 is
complicated, and
incredible.
understanding how a
And the
sequel
thing
is in
is,
conversation.
we
with
all
looking before it
understand
can
that,
be
like,
nuanced,
obviously a
but,
PlayStation flop is like
well,
one thing.
it's just okay, but PlayStation is in its flop era.
A critical error is an error which the OS cannot reasonably ignore. Jake Steinberg is a streamer, writer, and certified yapper. Complimentary. Peter Hunt Szpytek is a YouTuber, journalist, and certified yapper. Derogatory. These are the things they cannot reasonably ignore.
PlayStation is in their flop era. So I think obviously right from the top here, we just want to clarify. We are not referring to financial failure or like relative success of this video game platform. I think for me, when I think about the flop era, at least what I'm talking about, I'm curious to hear from you, is this idea that this era of PlayStation specifically is creatively stagnant and maybe historically unmemorable, as opposed to what people might describe as like the golden eras of PlayStation. Is this kind of where you fall down on this as well?
Yes, when we were saying like PlayStation is in its flop era, I think the first like instinct that someone is going to have is going to be like, well, look at the review scores for these games. You know what I mean? Look at how God of War Ragnarok scored and how Ghost of Yotei scored and like all of these games. And that is correct. We are not saying they're making bad games. I think like that is the immediate response, that like the clarification is like, it's not that they're making bad games. It's that what they're making right now is really, really, really safe. And safe is fine. It's totally fine to want to play games that are completely, I guess safe is just the word I would use for it. Familiar. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you look at sort of the history that PlayStation has of taking big swings, it feels like they have largely, and it's not always true. I think we're going to talk about some outliers at some point today, but they have largely been playing it safe since the launch of the PlayStation 4.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think when I am interrogating this issue, I'm thinking that PlayStation has really specifically has played a role in kind of upholding sequel culture.
Yes.
These games that are defined as it's the last one, but more polished, more gameplay features. It is the core of it. The heart of it is that game that you remember, but we have a list of new features on top of it, maybe a new playable character, maybe a new power, maybe a new weapon, that kind of sequel ideology. I think when I look at some big PlayStation titles of the last few years, I'm thinking about something like God of War Ragnarok. And I like that original God of War reboot quite a bit. And my favorite thing about it is that I felt that game had this kind of raw perspective. The thumbprint of an author was being communicated through that game. Somebody who had a perspective and something to say. And that to me was the most special thing about that game. It had a conversation not just with the player, but with the meta context of being a God of War game. I thought that was really interesting in that moment.
Yeah.
And then to kind of divorce that game from that directorial vision and from that meta conversation and just say, okay, this is the outline of what God of War is right now. Now let's give it more playable characters, bigger stakes, more powers, more abilities. And I think, more content, more polish. I think losing that narrative tension, losing that raw perspective is you're losing something about what made that game sing. And
because I feel like with like God of War specifically, I think maybe it's not just that PlayStation is in like a flop era, quote unquote, but maybe it's more like PlayStation is in its sequel era. And of course, there's always been PlayStation sequels. Like it was like Crash 1, Crash 2, Crash 3, Jak and Daxter, Jak and 1, Jak 2, Jak 3. You know what I mean? Like they've been doing that. But like because the console generations are so big and it takes so long for games to come out now, you are feeling the weight, I think, of this idea that they're kind of just doing another one. God of War Ragnarok, I liked a lot. There is some really great writing in there that really resonated with me. I'm thinking specifically about the thing that like hits me hardest is at the end, the conversation between Thor and Kratos about like, we are meant to be destroyers. And he's like, no, we're not. And like this sort of thing. That's great. But it is exactly what you're saying. This pretty safe sequel to a game that feels like it was trying something new and making a big sort of swing. I feel similarly about Ghost of Yotei just came out. I have played a fair amount of it for work, and I feel that game is a really standard, safe sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, which was a game that I think was really compelling and fascinating with the way it told the story using a really strong character dynamic and building a world and mechanics around that character. And then when that character is gone, Jin is not in Ghost of Yotei. Atsu is a completely different person than Jin, but she's given the exact same mechanical abilities to the point where I kind of don't think they make a whole lot of sense.
And there's a degree too, which I think something that I am feeling is that there's a homogenization of these PlayStation first-party games.
Yes.
Where it's not just that God of War reboot and the God of War Ragnarok games are this kind of game. It's that they're in the image of this third-person action game, this cinematic, high-fidelity third-person action game. And it feels like the stuff that we are interested in investigating are these unsubtle emotional beats. We're very interested in grief. We're interested in trauma. We're interested in the outline of a wound and pressing in on it as a shortcut to depth. And in that, I think what you lose, and I think in why we're referring to this as an era of PlayStation, is that you lose all of these little tendrils, all of these vines that used to make up PlayStation as a brand. I'm thinking about Little Big Planet, Infamous, Gravity Rush, Warhawk, Wipeout, Sly Cooper, even Ratchet and Clank. All of these games that look different, feel different. Even if you look back at the God of War games before the reboot, that isometric action game, that was a different kind of game. It was you were doing something different. You were acting upon the gamer in a different way. And because of this homogenization, because of all of these games kind of being made in the image of, I think what we would recognize now is maybe The Last of Us. Though I would draw the line to Batman: Arkham Asylum. That would be my perspective, because that kind of like feels like Batman to me is what people like about Spider-Man, and I think it's what people like about they would never say it this way, but it like feels like Joel is like what kind of grounds you in a perspective.
I think it's a mix of things, right? I think The Last of Us, I would argue, is one of the most influential games of all time.
I agree.
Because it was like, when it came out, there were so many people who were like, oh my gosh, did you know video games can be mature and talk about like the human condition? And it's like, they have been doing that, but it's like the easiest way to get it across is that it's told in, I think Jacob Geller made a video about like horror game remakes, because there was the Dead Space remake, the Resident Evil 4 remake, and the Last of Us TV show all at the same time. And he says like, the HBO TV show is a remake of a game that was already trying to invoke an HBO television show. And so I think that when The Last of Us came out and it was a big hit, there was this sort of idea of like, well, what if we made all of our games, even outside of the structure of sort of a linear narrative story, what if we really built them around this idea of high fidelity performance and, as you say, like trauma and fatherhood? And that not every game is necessarily needs all of those elements. You look at like the Horizon games, like, yes, there is an element of parenthood in those, but I would not say they are games about fatherhood. You know what I mean? No. Like Ghost of Tsushima, same sort of deal. Like, it's not about fatherhood. There's a familial element to it, but I think it's this like sort of general statement of these games are trying to be like this because it was such a big hit commercially and critically. And I understand trying to want to emulate that, but I do think that when all of your games are emulating that, for the most part, not all of them do. You look at Astrobot is not doing that at all. I think it's doing something else within the context of what we're talking about here, but it's not doing, this performance-based thing.
But Peter, I do want to say, I do feel that almost like a large amount of the love directed towards Astrobot is almost because it is a panacea to the current era of PlayStation, because it is not operating. I almost feel like it is safe to say that right now PlayStation doesn't make games as much as they make seasons of television, because even in those games that you talk about, like Horizon, which is like, okay, it's not doing these specific themes or whatever, I feel comfortable saying that like these games are the easiest games PlayStation has ever. They are games that would translate into TV shows and movies better than any past generation of games that they have made before. They are games that you can talk about in the language of books, TV, and movies, and feel like that language translates most directly, almost an abandoning of the language of video games in favor of the language of a prestige television drama.
And I'll say this, I don't think that's necessarily bad. Like,
no,
inherently.
It's not. Of course,
I don't think that's necessarily bad. But for me, it feels like PlayStation is sort of leaning almost exclusively into that, which I get why it's very popular. It when you see a trailer for Horizon Forbidden West or Ghost of Yotei or whatever, if you are not someone who plays video games, I think it's really easy to understand the appeal of those games. And then that might make you say, maybe I should pick up a PlayStation at this point and grab, some of these games.
Well, and we're in this
easy
era
to understand. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we're in this era right now too, where it's not hard to imagine the financial component of this. Does it make sense to invest in game properties that better lend themselves to multimedia adaptations? Of course it does. With that said, where is my Twisted Metal video game, you fools? Is it because they can't? Is it because they can't figure out how to make it a third-person action game? Is that possibly the reason?
Maybe.
Yeah. But and I think we obviously all recognize that the games being greenlit now are the big hits, the reliable, it's less about experimentation, more about, can we get a huge return on this incredibly high production cost of this video game? And I do want to acknowledge that. I think it's obvious. I don't think we need to belabor that point.
No, it is so of course the reason for this is industry. It is because of the industry and because of the state of the industry. There's no question about that. And like, I also want to say too, like, I know we said at the top, but it's not like these games aren't bad. They're also not like completely devoid of ideas. There are ideas going on in them. But and like when I'm playing something like God of War Ragnarok or Ghost of Yotei, those are the two that are like just like coming to mind so much for me right now. There's certainly have been some in between then and now. Or like Spider-Man 2, right? Great example as well of like, it's great to play them. They're fun. I have a really nice time with them, but also my feelings about them are almost entirely the same as the game that came before them. And I go like, oh, just another one of these. Great. I like the Ghost of Yotei. Been playing it. I like the mechanics of Ghost of Tsushima. I like the exploration in that game. I like the combat in that game. And so that means I like the combat and the exploration and all that stuff in Ghost of Yotei, because they are largely, it's not that they're unchanged. There's been stuff added to them. They have been altered in a certain way, but they are largely the same, we
have been billing this podcast a bit as we are concerned with the ways in which we talk about video games, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So something I do want to bring into this conversation is that I think that the sequel culture has inspired a maybe bad habit in the world of video game criticism. And this is something that I do want to say I have seen not just with Sony PlayStation games, but also with most recently coming to mind, something like Hades 2, where I cannot tell you how many reviews I have read where the critic, I think, uses hey, did you like Ghost of Tsushima? Did you like Hades 1? It's more Hades. It's more Ghost of Tsushima. And I think that shorthand dismisses engaging with the game. I think that are a large amount of people who are almost using it as an excuse to not do their jobs and not like close read a game because they think that the work has already been done. And it's I don't need to tell you if you're going to like this or not, or how to engage with this material, because we already did that however many years ago. So it's that plus all of these gameplay features that you can read on the back of the box. It was an 8.5 out of 10. Now it's a 9 because there's more.
What's interesting though too is and again this is, like you said, it's not exclusive to Sony. It's just that in my opinion they are the ones that are like most visibly doing it right now.
They're perpetuating it on a grand scale. Yeah.
And because you can look at the games they publish and they tend to skew in this one specific way. Like there's just an easy way to identify it. This is a problem, I think, across a lot of the games industry with sequels and things like that. But the biggest sort of proponent, like the biggest example of this point for me in my life right now is Borderlands 4, a series that I have traditionally really not liked. I really don't like Borderlands 1, 2, 3, whatever else. I thought Tiny Tina was fine. I played it for work, so that also changes sometimes how I feel about something. But with Borderlands 4, I am having a blast with this game. And I think if I sat down and I really compared and contrasted Borderlands 3 and Borderlands 4, I'm sure I could come up with some reasons as to why I like it a lot. But it's interesting because when I read reviews for Borderlands 4, a lot of them say, like, you already know what this is. It's more Borderlands. And I'm like, but why do I like it then? And of course, there's like personal tastes change, right? If I went back to Borderlands 3, I might find, hey, I actually do like this. Maybe it's possible. But I personally don't think that's what's going on, because I just think it's doing something that's a little bit different than those other games that's making me enjoy it. And I would love if there was that critical read from someone who was writing a review about it, about like, well, what about this game is making it unique and different from this series, or like, what is this doing?
This is a phenomenal example. So I'm somebody who is pretty intimately familiar with the Borderlands franchise.
You like
play
it a
every
lot.
game. I'm a big fan, and I can see both sides of this, where if somebody told me like, oh, it's pretty much more Borderlands, I would be like, yeah, I get why you think that. And then if somebody else was like, there are so many little levers and little dials that are being adjusted that come together to make this actually, when you play it, a really different experience, I would hear that person out as well. Because as somebody who is entrenched in the franchise, I see both sides of it. And I think that like identifying that you as the individual, as the critic, have a perspective, and doing that work is something that I need to see in these reviews more than I need to see, well, it's Borderlands with the number 4 attached to it. Here is what the game is telling me is new and different. And and that is largely the work that I'm seeing with that game. So
And then so when it comes back then to something like Ghost of Yotei, which is, I think, top of the mind because it's new, the reviews just came out. By the time you're listening to this, you can play the game, all that sort of stuff. Like, that has been largely what I found reviews of Ghost of Yotei to sort of be as well, though, of just like, well, if you like Ghost of Tsushima, you should try Ghost of Yotei. It's pretty good. It's pretty much the same.
And I have such a frustration with this. Oh man, it's mounting.
I will also say this is like, I am also considering the ways Ghost of Yotei is different, right? I think one of the things that a lot of people want to point to with Ghost of Yotei specifically is like, oh, well, structurally, what they will point to, because like it's not out at this exact moment, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, structurally, it's different. You can choose which order you want to go take down the Yotei 6 in. And yes,
the first game was, you could choose very much the order you did things in.
Well, it's like the main quest splits off in Ghost of Yotei. In Ghost of Tsushima, there was like, well, there's the main quest, but then there's also the quest with the thief lady, and then there's I see the difference here. But what I would say is that like, it doesn't commit to that really at all, because all that amounts to is there are 3 objectives on the map. You can choose which order you go to the main objectives in, but you have to do all these 3 things before the story like progresses. And then once it progresses, I'm at a spot right now where the game splits into 2 spots, and you can say, I'm going to pursue the snake, or I'm going to pursue the demon, the Oni. And so it's just 2 completely discrete areas that you will go to one, you complete it, and then you will go to the other, complete it. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's really not that choice. It's build that way, and I can see the marketing of saying like, oh, you can choose which order you do these things in. But it reminds me a little bit of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where when those games came out, they were like, we're doing like a Breath of the Wild thing where you can choose which gym battles to go to and battle in the order that you want. But then secretly, the game is like, but there are level caps on these, and so you are going to want to do these in one very specific order.
That's correct.
Ghost of Yotei isn't doing that, but it is doing this thing where it's like you are going to be going to all of these places. It's just you are choosing which background you want to see first and which story you want to see first, but you don't know anything about them until you get there. So like,
oh sure, if the choice does not amount to a meaningful change in your outcome, then is it even really a choice?
Right. Yeah. It's you're just playing the game.
It's the difference between like deciding the order of your cheeseburger ingredients. Is it the tomato or the lettuce? For when you take a bite, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
And by the time you finish the game, I don't think anyone's going to go like, wow, like I really chose. Like I had so much freedom. And I think like a lot of people are sort of saying like, or might say like, oh, it's kind of like Breath of the Wild in that, where that game just says go and figure it out. But it's different because like, yeah, that game does a similar thing. Like, well, what area order do you want to go to? But it's just so open-ended that it's not a comparable experience. But what I'm getting at here is Ghost of Yotei, I think, tries to take a swing, but ultimately falls back on we are just doing things that are really similar to Ghost of Tsushima. Even though there are some things that you could say we are doing structurally different, or this is kind of different. Yeah, it is, but it's a superficial difference. There's not sort of a reinvention or something else that's going on here. It's just a pretty standard, safe sequel to a game that is admittedly excellent, but I
think that somebody could argue that sequels themselves are almost a conservative path to go down for your game. And I think like you see how the criticism of these games almost mirrors the game's conservatism by recycling their own language and by being like, it is more of this, more of that. And I think something that I find frustrating about this conversation and this feedback loop is that when Breath of the Wild comes out, it is coming out in a context where something like Breath of the Wild is completely unheard of. It is coming out in a time and place where Breath of the Wild does not exist. And now that Breath of the Wild exists, that colors my interpretation of every game that tries to mimic Breath of the Wild, obviously. Yeah. It is not going to hit me in the same way. And I think that is simply how living on a linear time plane works. And something about these games and these sequels and the ways in which we talk about them is that I feel like we don't recognize that the context has changed. Like, Ghost of Yotei being Ghost of Tsushima plus more does not mean that you simply give it a plus 0.5 or a plus 1 on your review scale and then the conversation is over, because what Ghost of Tsushima is 5, 6, 7 years later is not what it was 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yes. And I think to that point too, like, I think that if I had to guess, a response to this podcast is going to be like, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want? Like, it's a sequel. What do you want? Yeah. And I think to just imagine that a sequel is just more of that original thing, more the story continues, or maybe it's a new story, you know what I mean? Like the Ghost of Tsushima, Ghost of Yotei, it's anthology, right? God of War, Ragnarok is a direct follow-up to God of War. Like, I understand wanting it like that. I understand that is like a way to do it, but I think it's a safe and sometimes boring way to do it. When I look at, you bring up Zelda, like, Zelda is a series that is constantly reinventing itself. You look at Ocarina of Time, one of the most critically acclaimed video games ever from 1997, like, and it still is. And you get a sequel, Majora's Mask, and that game is so bafflingly different. It uses, it's an asset flip game. So a lot of people are like, well, they're not going to just make a brand new game because they have spent so much time making all these assets and whatever. Yes, 100%. I'm not saying you should scrap all that, but you look at, Majora's Mask, and it uses so much from that original game, but it has such a distinct identity. Or the Zelda series does this a lot. You brought up, as we were sort of getting prepped for this conversation, Resident Evil, right? Yep. Resident Evil 1 through 3 are a very similar sort of feeling series. And then you get Resident Evil 4. and that's completely different. And then Resident Evil 5 and 6 are Resident Evil 4 plus some, and then you get Resident Evil 7, which is completely different again. And like, it reminds me of like, well, what do you want? Well, they've already done they're capable of doing it. God of War 2018 is exactly what I'm talking about. That's a great way to do a follow up to this series, you know?
And again, I think that we should clarify over and over that the issue is not that these sequels exist. It is that I feel that in this era, Sony has built their entire brand identity on these safe sequels.
Yes.
And the safety is I think the issue here. But also I think that when we, as people who talk about games, say, oh, Spider-Man 2 is more Spider-Man, Ghost of Yotei is more Ghost of Tsushima. When we do this, what we are implicitly doing is treating the sequel stagnation as if it is natural, as if that is what it's supposed to be. Yeah. And I think that mindset makes criticism worse and makes games forgettable. And I think that a sequel should always, I think a sequel should always argue why it exists, right?
Yeah.
It should always justify it, because the justification for the sequel should not be that the last one sold well.
Yes. And I think a great example of this out of PlayStation is like The Last of Us 2. I think The Last of Us 2 does a really good job of justifying its existence by saying, like, I think you could have left The Last of Us 1 alone and never done anything else with it and been like, that's a complete story and it's done. And I think it ends on a note that is, it could go on. It doesn't have to. And it goes on, and I think it does something that's really interesting by playing with the idea of empathy, which is something that the first game was interested in, right? The first game is about empathy. The second game is also about empathy. But I think that Naughty Dog did something really interesting with it by playing with perspective. And yes, it is a game that is doing the exact same thing we're talking about, where it's like, it is a HBO drama narrative that is very built around performance and characters and fidelity. 100%. Absolutely agree. However, I think it's still doing something interesting and compelling as a game by taking a swing with it, right? And taking a swing with structure. And that I find to be really, really interesting. And so if they ever do a Last of Us Part 3, that's where I start to go like, well, I worry that might be a safe thing, because what do you do from here? You know, hopefully if they do it, it's not, or whatever. But yeah, what's up?
And then taking this and then going back to Ghost of Tsushima and Ghost of Yotei.
Yeah.
You asked earlier, like, well, what, like this kind of supposed question of, well, like, what do we want from sequels? Yeah. Is there any part of you that is like Sucker Punch making the next, let's call it the next Ghost game? Okay. Why is there something about this franchise that demands it be set in Japan? That demands that you are kind of leaning on this samurai aesthetic? Is there not a Ghost of Brooklyn, New York? Is that not?
That'd be so sick, though. Yeah, I like that conceptually.
And it's funny that we've got this American studio, Sucker Punch, that has attached themselves to, I think, the most conservative concept of a sequel imaginable, and we all kind of presume, well, of course, that's what a sequel is, until it's not. And why can't it? Yeah,
it makes me think about like Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2. And I think Assassin's Creed is the common comparison with the Ghost games, and especially now that they did Assassin's Creed Shadows. And, you know, obviously this is that's set in Japan, and it's telling a similar story. I mean, Naoe and Atsu are almost the same exact character in terms of their origins. I think about like Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2. That's another game that, like, I think it takes what worked from the first one and it uses it to jump off into a sort of new territory by changing up what the structure of the game is, by changing up the way the story is told, by changing up the way the characters are presented, and the abilities that the character has. I think it's a great game that expands upon everything that worked from Assassin's Creed 1 without sort of just wallowing in what Assassin's Creed 1 was. And so, like, the thought of them taking, what is that controversial?
No, I I actually that resonated. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then that's why I think like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I remember I'm like, oh, this is like literally just the same thing, but in Rome. You know, there's some changes, sure, but like, oh, okay, sure. But I think the idea of what you're saying of like, yeah, what like I think it's a great idea to jump off to somewhere else for a ghost of, you know, blank. You know, it could be American, it could be some other country that would be kind of interesting to see. I think if I had to guess, one of the logistical reasons for doing another one in Japan is because you do have all these assets, right?
I think so. But
you have the sword assets, you have a lot of the character design assets are going to be like not the same but similar, right?
A part of me feels that this is also the TVification of thinking about the ghost of whatever brand, though. It's a bit of a branding exercise. And if you were to diverge from the brand too strongly, the kind of multimedia value of this brand would lessen.
Yeah, because it's a sequel to Ghost of Tsushima. And so even though it's an anthology, they're saying, well, we do want to keep it in Japan because then also, like, you know, if you know your older brother who doesn't really play a lot of games, but he liked Ghost of Tsushima, you'd be like, oh, there's a sequel to that, and it's the Japanese samurai game, you know.
Yeah, and the inevitable season 2 of television writes itself.
Yeah. Yes. Right. I think you said something about television when we were sort of broaching this topic that I thought was kind of compelling. And you said something along the lines of like that first season really needs to fight for its place to exist. And then the second season is sort of coasting, or not coasting, but like maybe resting on its laurels or something like that.
I've been in these rooms, right? When you're making the first season of a television show and you're pitching that show and you're making a pilot and you're doing all of that stuff to sell it. You have to sell the product. You don't have to. Season 2 is a product of the first one selling well enough to justify it. Yeah. You don't have to have a good idea to sell. Oftentimes, season 2 is sold before you've even written it, before you even know what that story is. And that is not maybe a great way to approach art and media, just in terms of, like, let me ask you this. One, do you honestly remember the difference between like Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2, or do parts of those games blur together?
They certainly blur.
If God of War Ragnarok did not exist, would anyone feel like something is missing?
Right. No, exactly. It doesn't feel like it need. Well,
I don't know, man. I mean,
like they set stuff up, right? They set stuff up as like there is going to be sequel stuff. But I 100% know what you mean, where like this is a contained story that doesn't necessarily need to be followed up on. In the same way that like The Last of Us, if The Last of Us 2 never came out, I think you'd be like, damn, what a good game. You know,
oh my god, of course.
You know,
of course. Yeah. I hope I don't have people in the comments being like, well, actually, Jake, in God of War 20 whatever, you know, I'm like, because I understand that, and I think I understand from like the critical readers of these games how you have a desire to see what Kratos is going to do next. I completely understand that,
and they do set stuff up like that, like certainly.
Of course, but the heart of what I'm saying is I think it's not about just following up on threads and kind of like a canon in universe understanding of what's coming next. It's this story, this book that I'm picking up. Does it justify itself from page 1 to page 100 is it telling a story? Not just picking up from the old one and following through, right?
And I have to imagine that being a part of this sort of like big studio system, or even like making games is hard, right? Like I remember I filmed a documentary about Delilah Game Studios. They created Disney Illusion Island, which was that Metroidvania Disney game. Yeah. It was very cool to go be in that studio and talk with those guys and everything. But AJ, the studio head executive, or I don't know, the studio lead, was sort of talking about like, you know, we are very blessed that we get to work with Disney. We are very thankful for, you know, the relationship they also had. They did Battletoads, that game, that like reboot for Xbox years before.
That's cool. Yeah.
Very cool. And they said like, we are still a studio that works project to project. And as soon as that project is over, we do not know what's coming next. And that's really stressful.
Been there, buddy.
to my understanding, that is how most studios operate, right? Project to project. You think about Bend Studio at PlayStation, they did Days Gone, and then to my understanding, they pitched Days Gone 2. That pitch was rejected, and then now they have been sort of, at the very least, to my understanding, based on what I've read out of reports and whatever, and then also what they've been up to publicly, they're kind of a support studio for a lot of different other PlayStation first party studios, and that has to be extraordinarily stressful, right? So I'm imagining you're like, okay, we just launched God of War, and PlayStation's like, well, what are you going to do next? They're like, well, God of War 2, the sequel to that. And here's how we're going to do it, and here's how we're going to budget it. And they have to keep those things of like, well, it's a sequel, so it can't sort of jump too far in mind because of the studio system that they're sort of working within.
And oh man, what a can of worms.
And it's complicated. Yeah. There's so many layers to it. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of kind of there's a fiscal comprehension that comes along with this conversation that I think provides kind of answers. And I think it's important just to say that, like, you and I are not asking the question, how does this happen?
Right.
There is no confusion on our part over how this happens or why it happens even. I think what we are interested in is the effect that this has on us as gamers and on critics. Mm-hmm. And to kind of bring that conversation back to kind of the critical analysis of it, I find that this sequel culture, something that it has perpetuated on the critic side of things, is, as we've kind of been talking about this entire podcast, it's more X, it's more this. I more and more begin to feel like that kind of framing, to be a critic and to present any game as it's more Hades 2 is more Hades. Yeah. I think what you are doing there is you are accidentally positioning yourself as a fan. You are positioning yourself and you are upholding the fan perspective. And something that, so I'm playing Hades 2 right now, so that's why it's front of mind. And I know that this is a conversation about Sony PlayStation, but I think that this is a relevant talking point.
It works with sequels and
yeah. More of a headline than anything else, I guess. But
yes.
Yeah. No. What if we
click on the video?
Thank you. You made
subscribe
it this far.
on YouTube. Subscribe on Patreon. Patreon.com/criticalerror.
That's right. Something that I am noticing that happened in many of the critical reviews, not all, of course, for Hades 2, is that there is an assumption that you are already into what they are doing. Something that I felt that was really compelling about the first Hades game was the kind of situating of Zagreus as the protagonist, what he needed, what was important to him, kind of making his goal important to the player, and how the structure of the reactive structure of the game was constantly in conversation with his positioning as a character. I think that the original Hades is like a phenomenally well-built and interesting video game. Mm-hmm. Now, Hades 2 adopts almost wholesale the same structure as Hades 1. That roguelite, you're doing runs, instead of going up to the surface, you're going down into the depths. But it is ultimately you are kind of on the same path. And I feel that the game does not inject its protagonist with the same amount of interest or delight as they did with Zagreus, because they are assuming you know what you're doing, you know what the loop of this game is, and you are excited to see all of these character portraits and have them talk to you. But there is something missing. There's a perspective. There's a beating heart in this game that is not beating quite as strong as it did in Hades 1. Now, mechanically, is it a more interesting game when you're talking about the nuts and bolts of playing it and the combat and the enemy design and all of that different? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Are some of the places that you're going more interesting? Are some of the boons doing like maybe it is, but I think that insistence that it is Hades but more, it eschews that interrogation of what made Hades so interesting and does not apply that same interrogation that I am looking for to its sequel because of the aesthetic similarities of the first game.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying this because, so correct me if I'm wrong, because I have not played Hades 2 yet, but it sounds like Hades was a game that mechanically was sort of in conversation with its main character.
Yep.
And the reason that its mechanics existed, at the very least, it feels this way. I have no idea what that process was like for making it. But at the very least, the mechanics of the game were synonymous with who that character was and what he wanted and where he came from.
Yes.
And in the sequel, they try to adopt these same mechanics, but with a different character. And so fundamentally, there is a disconnect between those two things. Not that it's bad, not that there's anything wrong with that. It just creates a less...
the justification for it is not there in the same way that the protagonist of the first game justified the structure of the game that they existed in. The reason why that structure was what it was because of Zagreus and Zagreus's needs and what Zagreus demanded from the story. And
so there's a cohesion that's lost.
Yes.
So it's so funny you mentioned that, because that's exactly what Ghost of Yotei is.
I thought that might be the case, yeah.
Where Jin is someone who has this conflict between, am I the ghost? Am I the a noble samurai? Like all this stuff. And so like the whole crux of the mechanics of the game are built around that conflict. Do you do the honorable thing that he was trained to do and do the standoffs where you basically just knock on the door of all the enemy structures and you're like, come fight me? You know what I mean? And that's a whole system. Or do you do the thing that he knows will save his people, which is to be the ghost? That's really compelling.
There is something equally compelling about the futility of Zagreus fighting his way to the surface. Which a place that he cannot stay for long. There is a futility there that I think is such a great match for the roguelite structure of that game. And dying on the surface only to start back at the bottom and to fight his way back up over and over again. And it's so funny, man. In the sequel with the protagonist of Hades 2, I almost like don't even know why when she dies, she goes back to like the starting point.
Oh, sure.
I like don't even really know why, and I'm sure like there's I know like the canon like in universe reason, but as something with like thematic intent, that same kind of what that is pulling on, the heartstrings, the different ways in which those themes spiral out and connect to everything happening. I just don't think it's there. And what's so funny is that like such a huge draw of that game is how like the gods and goddesses kind of like play off of Zagreus and how they talk to you. And this is another thing that is just completely lost in the sequel. And they're so uninteresting. They're so boring. You can predict how every single conversation is going to go. And they even went so far as to put in an anime bathhouse mechanic in which you can invite the gods and goddesses to go take a bath with you as if it's a dating game. No integrity, just completely dropped. Funny. The mask has been completely abandoned. Yeah.
That's so funny. But like that speaks though then to the experience of playing Ghost of Yotei.
Yes.
As well, where
I'm loving this.
The character of Atsu is decidedly very different from Jin. She is not a samurai. She is not someone who is concerned with like nobility or honor or anything like that. That's fine. That's a great place to start. She's a lot more, to be honest, like the thief that Jin links up with at the beginning of that game and has sort of that whole sort of narrative with that where she teaches him to be that this is who you got to be, right? She's a lot more in line with that. And yet for some reason, and the reason being, well, it was in Ghost of Tsushima, you still have the ability to knock on the door of the places and be like, come fight me. And you do the standoff. And she's not a samurai. She like 100%.
This is what I want people to see. This is what I want people to see more than anything. The justification. The choice, why the choice is made, the integrity to the story being told. I really hope people get this idea. The degree to which like a high integrity choice is one that is fitting for the story you are telling versus a low integrity choice is one that is made for in a meta context, one that is made for the sake of the player existing outside of the game, for feeding you something that we know you want because it was something that you ordered the last time you came to our restaurant.
Yes. And so I wonder, like, it would be so interesting to talk to developers about this. Because they always love hearing, like when I get the chance to talk to devs and I ask them about choices, it's always they're like, oh, there was debate. We had a huge internal debate. I think we did a stream of Lego Party, which is on Jake's Twitch channel if you want to check that out. Where we did Lego Party is basically just Mario Party with Legos. It's very cute. It's very charming. We had a lot of fun. But I got to talk with the devs of Lego Party at Summer Game Fest this past year. And one of the things that is distinct about Lego Party that separates it from Mario Party is that when the game is over, there is not the random bullshit that happens. So, you know, in Mario Party, where it's like, okay, we're actually just going to give new people stars and we're going to give people money and all this sort of stuff. And like, it can feel like it's chaotic and imprecise because even if you technically won the game by playing the best, you still might not win when the game is over. And Lego Party does not do that. It is who wins the game is based on who got the most golden bricks, no matter what. That is how the game ends. And there's not that like randomness to it. And I asked the developers after we finished our round, me and Christian were there, friend of the pod, Christian Macias, were there. And I asked them, or maybe he asked them like, so no bonus bricks, no bonus stuff at the end. And they were like, we had a long debate about this internally.
That's awesome.
And we came to this conclusion based on this. And, everyone sort of had their own take on it. But we ended up deciding that this is what the game needed. And so I wonder if in talking to the developers, at Supermassive is it Supergiant or Supermassive? I never remember. Supergiant. Supermassive makes Until Dawn. But you talk to the devs at Supergiant, talk to the devs at Sucker Punch and say like, was this like what is the origin of this choice? And I bet you that they would say we had conversations about this. We talked about this. This was something that we actively chose to do because of blank.
It's a balance, right? It's a balance.
Yeah. Or they said like, we actually had to do this because of this reason, or we didn't even think about it. We wanted to create an experience that was not, we didn't think about it, but it's like, we wanted to create an experience that was mechanically the same as this other game. And that played off the idea that you were probably already familiar with these mechanics. And so we wanted to keep them in. I would be fascinated to hear about that conversation and would be curious to hear like what their take would be on that,
And ultimately, I think, okay with any choice that they make. And I am less okay with what I perceive as the outright refusal to interrogate these choices.
Yes, that's the thing is my hope would be that they would say, we talked about it and we decided this. Yeah. And not that is like, well, this is Ghost of Tsushima 2. So
I'm not even saying on the part of the game creator. I'm saying on our part. I'm saying
100%.
That's what definitely.
Yes, where now it is our job as people who play these games, as critics, as fans of gaming, to try to explain to ourselves and understand why these things happen and if they work or if they don't work and why. And I think
yes, because again, I think when you take on that perspective of it is this but more, you are situating yourself not as a critic but as a fan. You are not interrogating why those choices are being made again. Why would you, when another movie comes out, should you not interrogate why the story being told is, you know what I mean? These are,
because I wonder, like, okay, Ghost of Yotei is just top of the mind for me. And it's I think a good example of this. Yeah. I wonder if you play Ghost of Yotei without playing Ghost of Tsushima, which is bound to happen. There are bound to be people who are picking this up that didn't play the original, right?
Of course. Yeah.
I wonder if there's that question about like, why can I do this? Why can I do the standoff? You know what I mean? Like it's cool. It's cool, but like
that's a great,
if you haven't played the original, you wouldn't know. Or I think about like in God of War Ragnarok, same thing, where it's like God of War 2018 has that scene where he goes and he gets the Chaos Blades from out of his house, buried in his basement, right?
One of my favorite scenes in video games.
Of course.
A moment of transcendence that I found to be powerful, the ways in which it brought in the kind of meta stuff that game is in conversation with, this acceptance of the person that you used to be, this reluctant acceptance, and how that materializes not just in getting this new weapon, but giving you something that is new but familiar on a gameplay mechanic level, and how that's operating in the game's narrative and for the player. Like, what a great moment. Yes.
But I think what is so important about what you're saying there, though, and the things you've identified are what makes God of War 2018 such an excellent sequel. or such an excellent follow-up because it is doing more than just saying, well, he had to have the blades because he had the blades in the first one, or in the the original trilogy.
Great
it's
call.
doing more than
Good
that.
Call. Good call. You're right.
It's doing way more than that. And for me, it feels like they gave him a spear, spoilers, in God of War Ragnarok.
Oh, I hate that spear. Oh, I hate that spear.
It felt like they gave him a spear because they were like, well, he had to get a new weapon. And to me, I'm like, well, that's not, well, then that's less interesting, right? Because it just feels like obligation. As opposed to, what's that?
And the way that they justify that new weapon in the narrative is so funny because they're like, we need something that can do this. Well, luckily, like every dude, the amount of times that Ragnarok participates in what I call key in front of a locked door storytelling, in which you approach a locked door, and then right on the ground in front of it, they go, oh, the key. And it's like, oh, we made it through the door. Oh man, they love that in that
Ratchet
game.
and Clank Rift Apart did that too. Just like, well, we need to do this. And it's like, well, luckily there's a whole planet for that. And you're like, okay, well, great.
There's all this purple stuff that we can't get through.
Yes.
Oh my God, I just got the purple stuff destroyer. Sick.
Yes. It's so silly. But I think what's interesting about that too is like Ratchet and Clank is a series that, you get that's on the PS5. Insomniac's making a new version of this, and that I'm not a Ratchet and Clank fan. I played that one. That's the only one I've ever played. To my understanding, that was kind of an interesting sequel because it did do some stuff that kind of turned that series on its head a little bit and was a compelling new entry in that series. But then you look at like, okay, cool. What's Insomniac going to be up to now? Oh, Marvel Forever. Like Marvel forever until the heat death of the universe. Like, okay.
And don't you even see that trailer for that new Wolverine game? And in your head, you are like, it's this plus this plus this, and it's like these. It's built in the image of these like Sony PlayStation games that we're talking about. And I gotta say, the Ratchet and Clank thing, as a diehard fan of that franchise, I think Ratchet and Clank really lends itself to creativity and expression and experimentation. And to know, I think now that franchise has maybe died on the vine, that even if we do get another one, it will be seen, I think, in a similar way as Astrobot is seen as kind of a panacea to it's not quite like that, but I think it's going to end up being, it's more Ratchet and Clank. I can't help but think that if Ratchet and Clank ever comes back, it's going to be, well, it's more Ratchet and Clank. And it was so many of these PlayStation games. It's like I think eventually we're going to get a new Gravity Rush game, right? Because they're doing a Gravity Rush, I think, a TV show.
They just said they're going to do something for everything that it's ever been PlayStation.
And I'm do you have any confidence that Gravity Rush game is not going to kind of just be like a remake of the first one? Like, it's not like that's what it's just going to be, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure. But even then, like, that is something that it's not that it's a Gravity Rush movie they're doing, by the way.
That's hard to believe. Okay.
It's not. I've been thinking about Saros. Can we talk about Saros?
Oh yeah, well, we make one point about the Gravity Rush thing.
Yeah.
I hope when the eventual Gravity Rush remake comes out that is made because of the movie, that people interrogate the fact that Gravity Rush was originally made in the vision of the PlayStation Vita because it had motion controls that you were flying around. It made sense for the platform that it was on, and like you having the screen and like moving around and picking where you were going to direct gravity, it made sense. So when you translate that game, just like they did with the remaster to PS4, something is lost there. And you don't get to just go, oh, this is Gravity Rush again. You have to interrogate the things, what's going on there. So okay, anyway, that's my Gravity Rush soapbox. But Saros, yeah.
But to your point though, this is like there's a direct line here where I'm like, I don't know, but I kind of would welcome. If they did a new Gravity Rush game, I would welcome at least the novelty of this is something that is different from the what we're talking about with PlayStation and the like performance driven, whatever, like motion capture driven HBO drama type game, because Saros is a follow up to Returnal, which itself I think could be written. I think if you only watched trailers of that game, you'd be like, oh, this is another sort of version of this performance-driven thing from out of Sony. But it's not. Like that is it.
But Peter,
you think it is?
It's here's my take.
Yeah,
I love Returnal. I think Returnal is like a 10. I love that.
I think it's like the best game on the PlayStation 5.
but I also think that it is undeniable that you look at the lineage of Housemarque games, and it is Housemarque making one of their games in the image of the mandated Sony first party game.
Yes. No, you are not wrong. You are not wrong. And that's why with Saros, it's like, okay, now we've got an actor that I recognize, right? Raul Coley. In the same way, we're like, okay, we're getting actors to play main characters in PlayStation games, right?
Right.
Erika Ishii, Izatsu. So that's an actor I recognize.
The new Naughty Dog one with that woman.
Oh yeah, I'm forgetting her name. She's been in. She was in
Intergalactic. Is that what that game's called?
Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet.
Good for you, man. What
Going
a
for
fool.
it. Going for it.
See, but that's a game. You're a Sony fan. There you go. That was good.
That's a game that I think it's of course going to do everything that Naughty Dog games do in terms of being the performance-driven narrative experience. But I am going to be really interested to see what that game does on a mechanical level, because it is a departure from what they have been doing with just over-the-shoulder third-person action stealth, right?
Is it?
Well, she got a big sword. She's got a big laser sword. She's fighting a big guy. I don't know. I think it could be. I think it could be something that is different. I don't know yet. We only got the one trailer. So, like, I guess to put a sort of period on this conversation, I think I'm curious what you think about, like, this isn't a problem that just Sony deals with. This is a problem. This is an industry-wide sort of problem. So, do you think the solution is just like we just need more creativity? I feel so like surface level.
I think that
ignorant, maybe.
I think that the solution is that the critic class of video game enjoyers needs to be more incisive with their criticism of sequels and not bend to the position of, well, we all already decided that the last one was good. So starting from good, now let's interrogate this game. I think that is the problem, because if our tastemakers and our opinion havers and the people that are kind of leading these conversations are not operating from that critical perspective and are instead operating from the superfan or enthusiast perspective, then I don't even know how to finish that sentence, but I think my point is clear.
I would have to agree with you, Jake Steinberg.
Okay. Thank you. Patreon.com/criticalerror is a place that you can go. And if you go there, they're going to say, give me money, give it to me. But we're not as aggressive as Patreon.
No, we're chill. We're cool.
That's not us. That's them.
Yeah.
That's not us. But we humbly, kindly would ask that if you are interested in checking out a bonus pod each and every week that this podcast comes out, you get the whole library when you subscribe, $5 and up. You skip that morning latte one day this month, one day, and you instead use your latte bucks on patreon.com/criticalerror. You are going to get so much delightful content from me and Peter there.
It's so true. I think our bonus stuff is, I think every pod we do is our best one until the next one. Wow. I really genuinely look forward to doing the bonus pod with you, because I feel like we learn so much about each other.
We really do. It's we take the parasocial dial and we dial it up so far that the knob breaks off.
Yes, we're literally every single bonus pod, we're just holding the dial in our hands, going like, what are we? We should probably do something about this. Let's record a podcast.
I know. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to. Yeah.
And hey, here's the thing: if you cannot become a member of the Critical Error Nation on Patreon.com/criticalerror, you are certainly welcome to subscribe on YouTube. Like this video. Let us know in the comments down below what you think. If Sony's in their flop era, if maybe you are completely totally fine with all the output they've had. I am curious because I am curious if like, is the average PlayStation fan starting to feel this? You know, is the average PlayStation fan starting to go like, you know what, I am maybe tired of just sort of this same thing. It's been this way since, you know, the PlayStation 4 game. That thing came out in what, 2013? It's been 12 years. You know, I'm curious. I just am genuinely interested to hear what people think about this sort of thing.
And Peter, I think my question that goes hand in hand with that one is, have you in your life, dear listener, have you noticed intuitively, maybe you feel like video game reviews are not as interesting to you as they once were? And I wonder if that's because these kinds of games that we are talking about and the ways in which they are being talked about is so present, so much more present than it was before, that you just are like, why are these video game reviews not as incisive or interesting? Maybe it's because of this upholding of the sequel culture. Now,
yeah.
Obviously, we wrap up these episodes. We come to a close with a piece prepared in advance.
Yes.
Last week was my turn, which means I get to sit pretty, kick back, oh mama, and listen to what Peter wrote for us this week. Peter, did you do your homework? Do you have your homework in on time?
Of course, I have my homework, but teacher, aren't you forgetting to collect our other homework? And our other homework is thanking our members of Critical Error Royalty. Our $10 and
so
up.
Sorry. Thank
patrons?
you so much. Peter, this is exactly like when a class has only a couple minutes left on the clock and the student raises their hand and says, did you forget to assign the homework? Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, you were that student, I was that teacher, and we have arrived here. Peter, please tell me who are the members of Critical Error Royalty at this particular time, our $10 and up subscribers.
Today on October 1st, happy October, everyone, we have Sam Cedar, Danny Disaster, Andrew Bolkar, and Connor Truelove. Jake, you've prepared a sound effect for them, is that correct?
As I do almost each and every week. Let's listen to it now. Sam, Cedar, Danny, Disaster, Andrew, Bolkar, Connor, Truelove. I never know.
Wow.
I never know when to stop listening to it. You know what I mean?
Here's the thing, Jake. When I had to edit the pod last week, I think I had to slow down this section significantly because now there's like 4 or 5 names on there.
I just pause it. I do.
Oh, do you?
I
see. I put us in slow motion so you can see us be like.
That's good. Maybe I'll do that this week.
Yeah. Jake, can I read you this essay I wrote?
Please.
Wonderful. I'm not married yet, but I'm getting married soon. December 31st marks a change in my life, an exact moment that I will be tethered to another person until the day I am nothing but dust and bones, soil and dirt. The process of getting to that moment, wedding planning, has had its fair share of fun, its fair share of fun relational revelations. However, there was one thing I discovered about what being married is like that no one, not a single soul, has detailed to me. I have found someone I would go with to the ends of the earth, for and with. A person who feels so like myself that sometimes I wonder if they're not just a mirage, but perhaps, more importantly, I have found someone with whom I will judge every single other wedding I go to with on the drive home. My fiance and I went to a wedding 2 weeks ago, and the very best part of it, Jake, not the dancing or the food or the laughing through drinks, was driving home and analyzing every single bit of the wedding. Toe to tip, we had explored it, understood each individual piece's meaning and potential price, and knew that not a single moment was not a carefully executed plan. We now know the price of the Swedish meatballs carried by waiters, the floral arrangements on tables, and how it's possible the venue didn't even provide the chairs we were sitting on. Our analysis doesn't come from a place of judgment, instead, one of intimate familiarity. We talked food, structure, how the mic was shorting out for the entire ceremony, if it was weird that the first dance was to a Harry Potter song, the suits, the dresses, and of course, what we would want to emulate and avoid on our date in December. Suddenly, I understand the television shows that compare and contrast weddings, pitting brides against other brides in a way that I used to think was cruel, but now I think is a necessary part of the human experience. It was a glorious drive back to the suburbs where, for just a moment, I felt a new type of connection to my fiance. More than just being a fun conversation, this drive was a promise to the future. Every drive back home from weddings from now until we are dust and bones, soil and dirt, we will have this exact conversation. Through the twists and turns of life, I will be tethered to this woman endlessly. We will share the greatest moments of our existence in one hand, paired with the most devastating defeats and losses in the other. And somewhere in between, we will be yapping about every wedding we go to for the rest of time. Each time something happened at that wedding, I glance at her from across the room. She meets my gaze. Write it down, she mouths at me. I smile. This, but forever. Thank you.
Peter!
Thank you.
You have hit on a true universal experience that you don't know until you experience it yourself. And
No one
now
told me.
you are welcome to the secret club. Welcome. The language
Forever.
that we all learn and now
Forever.
are immediately fluent in. That is what
and
you
I see
expressed.
it.
Yes.
It's like I never thought about the hors d'oeuvres, the Swedish meatballs. Never thought about it at any wedding I ever went to. And then now I know it costs $120 for 50 of them. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? That's $3 per meatball? They're not even $3 good. Do you know what I mean? Like
you hit me with this at the exact perfect time. This past weekend was, of course, my first anniversary with my wife. And we call this wedding shopping, is what we call this. You're shopping. You got your weddings coming up. You're like, ooh, I'll take that. I'll take that. What a delightful experience that hopefully you only ever share with one person. And in this one like exact time. You know what I mean? It's like such a, when you're preparing for your own, and then the conversation afterwards, which you will soon discover, is about kind of comparing it to the one that you did have.
Yes.
And so it like changes a little bit. And this was delightful. This was the speed at which you brought me back to something was so fast. It was sometimes I talk about video games. I use time to fun, the TTF. What is the time to fun?
Yeah.
And I recently talked about how Super Mario Strikers on the GameCube, the time to fun is like 6 seconds.
That's awesome.
And yeah. And this was, I feel like you hit me with like a time to fun here that I was like, oh my God, the second I was in, you painted a world in my head. I hope that some of our listeners are familiar with this. I'm sure that they had a very similar experience to me. And if you have not experienced this yet, this is something to look forward to until you do.
It's so rare that you get taken by surprise, I think, as an adult. Oh, I mean, that's not entirely true. But like most things, like most surprises are bad. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, cool. Car broke. You know what I mean? Surprise, $3,000.
Right.
It's so rare that like surprises are like a delightful revelation. Do you know what I mean? And I had this moment and where I was sort of at the wedding when I realized like, wait a second, forever, this will be a fun conversation to have forever.
Peter, this is getting into a kind of bonus pod territory, but
it really is.
So if you want a taste of the bonus pod, I think I largely consider adulthood and maturing and an ongoing alignment of your values with your lifestyle. And and this is one of those delightful surprises of just getting closer to something that is like honest and true and like experiencing that with somebody else, and the cultivation of that shared secret language is so delightful. Yes. Oh my God.
Yes. It's the secret language, right? Where like across the room, you're like, we're going to talk about this. And it happens at different phases, right? Like I remember like when we were dating, it would be anytime her sister said stuff, we would be like from across the room, you know what I mean? At family gatherings, we'd be like, we're gonna talk about this on the drive home. And it's perfect. So, but this is a new level to it. Yeah.
Somebody at a wedding, the sister of the bride goes up to give a speech, and she immediately starts, for those that don't know me, we look at each other. We go, And then,
that's the wedding version of Return to Form.
Oh my God. Well, thank you everybody so much for listening to the Critical Error podcast. Again, we are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So again, if you cannot support us on patreon.com/criticalerror, I would appreciate it so much if you at least hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And if you do indeed subscribe after watching this episode, you were not already subscribed and you subscribed now, you made it to the end of the podcast. You got to me saying this. If you go in the comments and you say, Jake, you got me, I hit the subscribe button. No, I will see that comment and it will in my real life make me go, no matter where I am, no matter who I am with. Ooh, that is my promise to you.
I'll see your ooh, and I'll raise you a tasty.
Oh, thank you for listening.
If I see it, I'll get you a tasty.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.